Shalom, shalom. It's such a delight to be here today, both in Malibu and in Scottsdale, Arizona, with Tara Strong, a champion for the Jewish people, and with just a renowned actress and profound career and such a strong voice. She began her acting career at the age of 13 in Toronto. I'm also from Toronto, Canada.
No
So we share that.
way.
Yeah. So we got two Canadian Jewish vegans here. That's not so common, but
Woohoo.
she landed several TV, film, and musical theater roles, as well as her first lead in an animated series as the title role of Hello Kitty. After a short run at Toronto's Second City Theater Company, she moved to LA with an extensive resume that included her own sitcom and well over 20 animated series. Upon arriving in Hollywood, she quickly made her mark in several TV and film projects, such as Party of Five, National Lampoon Senior Trip, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and more. She has had an iconic voice over her career, including Bubbles in the Powerpuff Girls, Timmy Turner in the Fairly Odd Parents, Ben 10, Dill Pickles in Rugrats, Raven, Teen Titans, and Teen Titans Go. She provides the voices for Batgirl and Harley in all things DC Universe, as well as the title role of Unikitty, Rocky, The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle, several roles in Family Guy, Drawn Together, Rick and Morty, Futurama. She plays Melody in The Little Mermaid 2, Spirited Away, and many, many more. Some of her on-camera roles include the recurring Miss Collins on Nickelodeon's Big Time Rush and the horror comedy Witness Infection. She's currently starring in the hit series Pretty Hard Cases, playing the coveted villain role of Tiggy Sullivan. She's Emmy nominated and a Shorty Award winner. Her current hit shows include Raven, Teen Titans Go, Batgirl, Harley and Raven, DC Supergirl, Superhero Girls, Mama Box, and Kitty Girl Fairy, Gabby's Dollhouse, and the wildly successful Miss Minutes from Marvel's hit Loki. She has over 400,000 Twitter followers at Tara Strong. You should follow her, and has used her social media to raise several millions of dollars for kids with cancer or animal rescue groups, as well as using her commanding voice to combat bullying. She lives in LA with her two sons. She's been in the business since age of 13 and is a warrior for Am Yisrael, for the Jewish people. Tara, thanks for taking time to talk.
Thanks for having me. That was quite the intro.
Yes, and that only scratches the surface. Yes. So you bring so much joy with your voices to people around the world, and now continuing to use your voice in advocacy for the hostages in Israel. Such a horrible situation. How has this impacted you, both the situation and kind of using your voice publicly on this?
Whew. That's a huge question, right? I think we've all been so affected by October 7th in like earth-shattering ways. Like our world changed. Like when I was about 5 years old, my Zeta was a cantor in Toronto at Beth Rudham. Did you know where Beth Rudham was?
I never went there.
And my boobie was the caterer. And one day there was like a big commotion and someone had drawn a swastika on the side of the shul and said, "Die, Jew pigs," or something. I have the picture somewhere. But I remember thinking that's so strange. And I was on the March of the Living, and I there was some anti-Semitism still there. We had a swastika drawn on our bus. We had stones thrown at us. At Majdanek, there's a huge pit that says, "We lie here in warning to you" in Polish. And kids were throwing in cigarette butts and laughing. And I remember thinking, these incidents feel isolated. It doesn't feel like our existence. For the most part, Jewish people aren't hated anymore. I remember an old Twilight Zone episode where they brought back the pogroms and the Holocaust. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And really thinking that could never happen again. And it honestly feels like we're stuck in a Twilight Zone. It's so strange to have this worldwide, very vocal hatred for our people. And I think my biggest issue is, and I'm not alone, I'm sure you're similar, we're light workers. We spread light and love. And it's very hard to stay in that positive space when you see so much suffering. Both in Israel and the innocents of Gaza, there are innocents there. I'm sure they're terrified to come out. The women's voices are completely muted. And it's heartbreaking. No one wants anyone to die. Like, the whole situation is so heartbreaking that I'm finding it hard to sleep, hard to function, hard to keep it out of my mind when I'm meditating. I can't believe people were stolen from their lives. And to think how close they are, right? To think of the next city over. If your child was the next city over, like it must be gut-wrenching for them to not go in and get them and save them from these
Mhm.
torturous environments they're in. And it's like the fact that the whole world isn't together against terrorism is very strange. I just don't understand the hatred. And the only thing that makes me feel better on a daily basis is if you're going to hate an entire group of people, if you're going to hate Jews, Muslims, Black, Brown, Asian, LGBTQ+, if you're going to hate an entire group of people, you can hate your boss, you can hate an ex who cheated on you. But if you're going to hate an entire group of people, it's all for the very same reason. You know what it is? There isn't one. How can you hate an entire group of people?
Right,
It
right.
doesn't make any sense. So I'm having a hard time because nothing makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, how alarmed do you think we should be right now? We see on the right the white supremacists and the neo-Nazis and the rise of what has been unleashed in recent years. We see on this left this total demonization of Israel, this rising anti-Semitism. We see this sense, like you said, of like siding with a terrorist group over a democracy. Like,
Yeah.
how are you making sense of this moment? It feels like everything is upside down.
It feels like a Twilight Zone. It feels like I'm in some crazy coma and like I just want to wake up. It's very strange. I don't
Yeah,
understand it. I don't people chanting Hamas slogans at marches and not knowing what they mean or not knowing which river, what sea.
right,
There's so much ignorance and misinformation being
right,
spread. And this is leading to mass hatred. And the problem is there are a lot of mentally unstable people in the world who will take violent and have taken violent action,
yeah.
and I think it's very scary. I think the whole world should be alarmed. I think if this happened at Coachella, the entire world would be making some pretty bold moves.
You
But because
know,
they were Jewish people, now we see there are still a tremendous amount of hatred. I have no idea why for Jewish people. And it's not just Israelis, it's for Jewish people. And also when the Black Lives Matter movement was at its peak, we all knew to share the mic. We all knew to let them say, this is racist, this is unacceptable. That's not the same that we're getting. Not only are we not getting to share the mic, they're taking the mic and they want to crash it over our head and crack our skulls open. Like I get death threats every single day. And now we see with the rise in anti-Semitism, it's like up 400 something percent,
right.
that the Jewish people need a safe place to go.
Right. When the worst thing in the world was to be a communist, the Jews are the ones blamed. When the worst thing to do was be a capitalist, the Jews are blamed. When the worst thing was to kill Jesus, the Jews did it. And if the worst thing you could do today is, be a colonialist, racist, state, it just so happens the world's decided that it's the Jews. And so it's hard to make sense of all that. And I wonder how you uniquely are experiencing this. You mentioned these death threats, and you've been so courageous on the front lines of like bringing awareness of these hostages, bringing some sanity to this horrific situation. What is anti-Semitism in Hollywood like? What is it like, someone of your kind of prominence, to use your voice for this? And how does that affect you?
It's really, really hard because, like I said, I'm here to spread joy. When I go to a
Right.
Comic Con
Right.
and I meet kids that say, this character saved my life. I had no friends
Right.
till this show, or I thought I was the only one like this till this show. And we hug each other and there's love and light exchanged. That's where I want to live. So when I am bombarded with
Right.
negativity, it's very, very hard. And it's hard on my heart. And I also know it's hurting the safety of other Jewish people, right? When they're like, you're pro genocide, you're this. When
Mm-hmm.
they say this to the Jewish people, no Jewish people want any innocent people to suffer. We want to invite everyone over and make matzo ball soup. Like,
Right.
it's
Right.
just not in our nature. We don't even want to argue with our boobies. Like, it's like very strange to be pegged as a terrible person when, in fact, by the way, I've sent a lot of money to Doctors Without Borders. I've
Right.
sent a lot of money
Right.
to help all sides of this horrible conflict, and I pray for all sides of this conflict. I want all wars to end. When the war in Ukraine broke out, I contacted all the major rape organizations and said, let's send kits, let's send rape kits to them, so at least they know someone cares. Not that there may be any justice, but let's try to help these girls. And I would send money, and like, I want all wars to end. If there was not one more dollar spent on wars, we could solve world hunger. We could house the homeless. We could cure all diseases if all funding for wars just stopped. It's like It's insane. So it's been hard. It's been hard to see me painted in a very negative light just because I'm not saying what they want me to say. But what they want me to say isn't my truth. And my
Right.
truth is, I've
Right.
become friendly with some of the families of the kidnapped victims, and they've asked one thing. These people who are missing their families have asked one thing, and that's keep our families' stories in the news.
Yeah.
Keep
That's right.
talking about them
Right.
so that people don't forget them.
Right.
And like, if that's the very least I can do, I'm going to do that.
Right.
If God forbid that was my son, my friend's son, if there was a missing kid in your
Yeah.
neighborhood, everybody
Right.
would be looking for this
Right.
kid.
Right. That's right. That's right. And the fact that that even becomes controversial in our day,
How is it
to take this
controversial
stand.
to
Yeah.
ask for kidnapped victims back? Every
Right.
single war that we've gotten into in Israeli history has been defending itself against people that want us dead.
Yeah.
And I think the main thing is to really, I've become friends with a lot of great Muslim activists who were taught as children to hate Jews. This is how they're taught, right?
Yeah.
And then they break free from it
Yeah.
and they learn and they spend time with Jewish people and they just realize
Right.
we are all one people. And now they fight as a voice for Israel, for Jewish people, for
Yeah.
peace, whatever it is. And they don't hate Jews anymore.
Right.
So I think it would
Yeah.
be, and I'm a Pollyanna, so forgive me,
Yeah.
but I think it would be amazing if we could go in and help them and reteach them about valuing life because they've been taught to value the afterlife.
Right.
And there's so much beauty here.
Right.
Like, let's be
Yeah.
beautiful together. An organization that I've been working with for over a decade is called Children of Peace.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing org in Israel. And there's Arab Israeli families, and they work side by side, and they
Yeah.
play side by side, and they do music and all kinds of things, hand in hand schools. There's plenty of organizations that bring Arabs, Muslims, Jewish people together, and Christians all over
Yes.
Israel. There's so much misinformation. They live
Right.
together in
Yeah.
peace.
Yeah.
It's the people that have sadly been brainwashed to hate an entire group of people. And I don't know what the answer is. I wish I did. But if there was a way to just make people wake up and understand that life has so much beauty and value and meaning,
Yeah.
maybe there's hope.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is.
I'm so glad you brought that up about the Muslim community because we have to break out of these tropes of left and right.
Yeah.
I've been doing Jewish Muslim dialogue work for years. And I know people on the left, you can't critique anything in Muslim society. And I know people on the right who are deeply Islamophobic. They hate all Muslims. And I think we, on the one hand, have to build those bridges. And on the other hand, have to name the fact that we've got hundreds of millions of Muslims around the world who are part of fundamentalist Islamic approach that supports Hamas. And I think we have to have our eyes wide open about that threat to democracy and to the world. So let's move to something more positive. Um, you could talk about this for hours, but just briefly, your Jewish identity. How did your Jewish identity form in a way that is so light-filled, so positive, so charged to take a stand for what's right and just in the world?
So my grandfather was a cantor, and my mother was first generation Russian Jewish. Her mother put her six sisters and mom on a boat in the pogroms, and on that boat, her mom said, "If I die on this journey, it's your fault." And my booby saved a generation, and she was just the most beautiful
Yeah,
soul. And I was raised very heavily in tradition. It wasn't so orthodox, but more like tradition and mishpacha and being together. And I really loved. I knew when I was 4 that I wanted to be singer, dancer, actress, and I loved to perform. And I would sing every Rosh Chodesh with the children's choir at the Adath Israel Synagogue in Toronto. And I just loved it so much. When I look back at my time singing in front of people at the synagogue, and it's a big, beautiful synagogue. And my very first job, which it wasn't paid job, but I was singing in the Yiddish theater in Toronto. And I went to Associated Hebrew School, and I was pretty fluent by the first grade. I have a great ear, and I fell in love with the Hebrew language. I can still speak. I speak to people, and they're like, "What?" And I've always felt very connected to my Jewishness. And only a few times growing up did I experience anti-Semitism. Nothing like what we're seeing today. Nothing like that. And again, March of the Living made me even more proud. The actual march. Have you gone on this trip? I'm sure you have.
surprisingly, I've never gone.
You should go.
Yeah,
So the end part of the trip is my trip was 6,000. For those of you who don't know, you don't have to be Jewish to go on this trip. Most people are, but you don't have to be. My trip was 6,000 from around the world, and you march from Auschwitz to Birkenau, where many, many of our ancestors died, in complete silence, in rows with your country. And the Israel contingency all wore like, we all had blue jackets and they all wore white pants. And like, it was so heavy and emotional and spiritual. And I was, of course, in the choir for the March of the Living. And we got to Birkenau, and our choir was standing on top of a crematorium that the Jews had blown up after they were freed. And it started to rain. And Elie Wiesel spoke.
Mm.
And he said, it makes my heart so happy to see all these young people here, because if you were here when I was here, you'd all be dead.
Yeah.
And we started to sing Eli Eli, and the sun came out. It stopped raining. And it was like this beautiful moment with Elie Wiesel and all these Jewish kids from around the world being together, honoring our ancestors. And that made me even more proud. And the other thing that I sang on this trip was a song written by Doron Levinson. He rewrote the tune to Lo Yesagoi on a train that had been blown up, but he was injured and he was blinded, and he never wrote music. And while he was blind, he wrote this new melody for Lo Yesagoi. And he actually ended up getting his vision back. And I sang this song on the album for the March of the Living, as well as to Arnold Schwarzenegger for an event for Israeli and Arab peace. I've been in this arena for a very, very long time. It's close to my heart. It's all I want. All I want in the world is peace and love and everyone being together. So it's very, very important to me. And the very first time I started posting on Instagram, I lost a bunch of followers. And I didn't really care, because I thought, it is the right thing to do to ask for our hostages. It is the right thing to do. And on the same day, I went up 40,000 followers from Israel.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, and I would get these messages like, Tara, the fact that you care about us all the way across the world, and like, I've always been a fan of yours, but now you're our queen. And like, the sweetness coming from them kind of made the hard times worth it.
Yeah.
But I just wish, in a perfect world, everyone was together against terrorism, not red versus blue, not Jews versus Palestinians, not Israel versus, it's everyone together against a terrorist org, which is Hamas, which is ISIS, which is Boko Haram, where tons of people are dying, being kidnapped around the world. That is the threat to this planet. That is the threat to peace. That is why going to the airport is really hard. People are forgetting about 9/11. People are forgetting that. And people suddenly saying wonderful things about Hitler, like their ancestors fought in World War II for a reason. I think it's really sad that people are so hating a group of people that they're not understanding the real problem, which is terrorism.
You're a hero to so many of us in that you've done what it means to be a Jew. What it means to be a Jew, in my view, is to do what is right rather than what's popular. And you knew you were going to lose likes, you were going to get death threats, you knew it might affect your career, whatever the case is, but you said, it's not only because I'm a Jew, but because I have a conscience, I'm going to do what's right rather than what's popular. And you brought up Elie Wiesel. And one of the ways Elie Wiesel taught us about how to combat anti-Semitism in the world is, yes, you have to combat it directly, but also we have to continue to use global platforms to represent the best of Jewish values. And that's what you do. That's what you do. In fact, I'm working with the Elie Wiesel Foundation right now on combating this Uyghur genocide. She says, how could we do it now in the midst of October 7th? How can we not put all of our resources and energy towards standing up for Israel and combating anti-Semitism? But the foundation understands, in the memory of Elie Wiesel, that we continue standing up for all kinds of causes at the same time as we're standing up for ourselves.
There is no limit to prayers.
That's
we
right.
can pray for the innocent people of Gaza. We can pray for the innocents in Sudan, in Aleppo. We can pray for all people, and we should.
Yeah,
the goal should be to help all people. That's the goal.
Well, so for our last topic of today, beyond all people, we both also share a concern for helping all animals. And that emerged for me, and I beat you by a year because you went vegan in 2012 and I'm 2011. And that for me was coming right out of Torah for me. That was coming out of Judaism, that we are to repair an all too broken world, to reduce suffering in the world wherever it is found. It emerged out of a Holocaust consciousness. It emerged out of a Jewish ethics consciousness. And I wonder, why did you go vegan? Like, what happened for you that this became this became an issue for you? Because it's not easy. It's especially
No.
in social circles you're in, you probably
Yeah.
miss most of the food, right?
I don't find it challenging in terms of like when I'm with other people and there's not a lot of vegan options, that's challenging.
Yeah.
But like there's no like desire to break it or whatever. And you know, like I said, my booby ran the catering. So we used to see chickens going into the pot, right?
Oh,
And my mom put like veal on my table on my plate and I was like, "What is this?" And she said baby cow. And I'm like, I can't. And then when I was 10, I went to the Royal Winter Fair in Toronto and they had a cow that a farmer brought out. Makes no sense to me, but they were getting her ready for slaughter and they walked her by the kids. And she wouldn't move. She like winced and the farmer backhanded her in
wow.
front of all the children and I saw
Wow.
a tear roll down her eye. This is a true
Wow.
story.
Wow.
And I was like, that's like a big puppy and I
Wow.
don't want to
Wow.
eat that ever again.
Right.
So for me, it's very, very personal to not eat sadness, torture, fear. Now, I get that the world doesn't want to be told what to do, and I get that it's hard for some people. So my main thing is to support orgs like Mercy for Animals that are very dedicated to stopping the torture that goes on in factory farming. So, it's really, really, really bad. And animals are treated really bad. And they're sentient and they want to live and they're friendly and smart. And they are very similar to dogs, right? Pigs, they say, are even smarter. And I don't know. I just personally don't want to pay for someone to kill an animal. And that is what needs to happen to get it on your plate. And I don't want to guilt everyone. I don't want to be labeled as an obnoxious vegan. But I just think we all need to push for better regulations
Right.
so that animals aren't additionally tortured in terrible situations, and also that the world cut back on eating so much meat.
That's right.
Because there's so much resources going to feed these animals.
Mhm.
And it's really, really bad for the planet. If you do a little research, you'll see one of the biggest causes of global warming is factory farming. So if we can take that down, if people can go down to like 1 or 2 days a week or whatever it is, we don't have to grow so many animals to kill them. And I think dairy is equally as cruel. I'm sure
Yeah.
you've seen the videos of,
Mhm.
so I stopped eating meat as a kid, but then my son actually showed me a video on how dairy really works. It's a great video called Dairy is Scary. It's 5 minutes if
Yeah.
anyone's interested.
Yes.
And it shows you how they really steal the milk from the mama cow who really wants to be
Right.
with her baby, and it's too heartbreaking. I just don't want anything to suffer, so I
Right.
don't want to pay for something
Beautiful.
to suffer,
So well
basically.
said.
Yeah.
So well said. So do you have a go-to Purim or Pesach recipe? I can't imagine you have a lot of time to cook or bake these days, but do you have a matzo ball recipe or?
I do have a matzo ball soup
Nice.
recipe. It's my
Nice.
mom's, and I make it
Okay.
vegan.
Awesome.
And my favorite holiday to put together is Passover. I had 70 people in my backyard one year,
Oh my
70.
gosh.
And
That
a lot
is
of
not
people
easy.
weren't Jewish. A lot of people had never been. And
Right.
I make little arts and crafts things for the kids to make their own little wine goblets with stickers. And I make it very fun. And like I said before, my love of Judaism is tradition. And I love this about all religions, where there's a tradition that brings
Yeah.
everyone together, that brings family together. That makes my heart so happy. So all the little things that you do in a Passover Seder, that's my favorite.
Awesome. Well, just to close with a prayer, with a bracha, really, that all the hostages come home, that this conflict can end once and for all, that Jews and all people can live safely in the world, and that we have an end to suffering one day for animals and for non-human animals, and that we can build a world of peace together.
Amen. Amen.
And Tara, thank you so much for all the great work you do and for how you're using your voice for so many causes and for the Jewish people. Friends, please follow Tara Strong on social media.
Thanks, Rabbi.